Hey everybody, welcome to the Bass Shed Podcast. My name's Ryan Roberts. How you doing, folks? My name's Ryan. I would like to welcome all the new listeners. Thanks for checking out the podcast. You can also find information at facebook.com/TheBassShed, Twitter @BassShed, Instagram @TheBassShed. There's a YouTube channel. There's links to all of it at TheBassShed.com, and you can email me at Ryan@TheBassShed.com as well. You can sign up for the newsletter that goes out probably a couple times a month, right? Letting everybody know what's going on with the content on the website as far as upcoming guests on the podcast. And you can sign up for the newsletter by texting the word SHED, SHED, to 66866. Once again, that is the word SHED, SHED, to 66866. All right, I want to take a second to talk about D. Lakin Basses. Customize the bass of your dreams with D. Lakin Basses. Every bass starts with a conversation with Dan Lakin. Dan Lakin is a co-founder of Lakeland Basses. His new company, D. Lakin, is pretty much set up where you give Dan a call and you talk about what you want on your bass. It's a really personal approach to bass building. You can reach Dan at 312-576-3943. I did it. I put in an order. With Dan. I put in an order for a P bass. It's going to be hitting production soon. I still haven't gotten back to him with what color I want. Him and I discussed some ideas about a bass that we were working on kind of together for a minute, and then it just went down this road, and I can't pick a color. I can't pick a color yet. But I love going through the process, talking with Dan about putting this bass together. I'll suggest something, and he's always got really good insight about what goes into making a bass. So again, D. Lakin Basses. Give Dan a call. Customize the bass of your dreams, and every bass starts with a conversation with Dan. His number, 312-576-3943. So today on the show is Nicholas Recuber. Nicholas is the assistant principal bassist in the Colorado Symphony Orchestra and also teaches at the University of Northern Colorado. I've known Nick for a little while. I studied with him when I first got to L.A. Nick was in town playing with the L.A. Chamber Orchestra, and it was a good time to connect with him. What you're going to hear on the podcast with all the background chatter is we did this at the food court in a mall. Yeah, that's right. Two dudes set up, having a podcast, the mic stand, the whole thing, the food court of a mall. It was great to connect with him. The concert you'll hear him talk about, I did go to, I think it was the following week. And it was a fantastic concert. Nick, there were some rough passages, and Nick nailed it all. You'll specifically hear him talk about the world premiere of this new piece by a modern composer. The composer was there. He came out. It was a great night of music, and the L.A. Chamber Orchestra sounded fantastic. It was really good to connect with Nick again. I hadn't seen him in quite some time. And I felt a little scattered. Because I was right in the middle of moving apartments. And so mentally I was a little bit all over the place, just had a lot going on in my mind. Nick kind of kept me on track. It was great to connect with him again, like I said, and it was also great to tap into a world of music that I don't deal with. It's not in my wheelhouse. I'm not an orchestra player. I'm not a classical player. And so I was really just kind of sitting there as if I knew nothing about being a professional musician in a sense, because I want to glean everything from what that world is like, and I really want to try to understand it. And it was cool. It was great to connect with him. Nick will also talk about the book he has published through Carl Fisher of Fantasies. Let me make sure I get this title right. Hold on. Let me make sure I get this title right. It's Fantasies for the Double Bass. Some pieces that Nick transcribed and adapted for the double bass. He'll talk about that. And it was a good one. I really liked hanging with him. And here is my talk with Nick Recuber. Cool, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool. So tell me about the program you're doing with the chamber.
Yeah.
Let's start
Well, this week I'm playing with Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra, and we're playing Beethoven's Seventh Symphony and some Berlioz songs, and then also a brand new piece by Andrew Norman, who is actually a Los Angeles composer.
Oh.
LA Phil just released an album with his work Sustain.
Okay.
And yeah, so this is a new commission, so no one's ever played it before, and it's kind of devilishly hard. And he told us last night it's the first movement of what will become a concerto for orchestra, a 4-movement piece or 3-movement piece that LA Chamber will be premiering one movement every year.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of.
And now you regularly play with the LA Chamber?
I've been fortunate enough to play with them, I guess, on and off for the past couple of years.
Okay.
They've since I started playing with them, they've had the second chair open.
Oh.
And they only have 2 bass players, principal and assistant, or they might call it principal and associate. But so I've been able to kind of just like come in and play guest associate, and this week I'm playing guest principal. But yeah, it just sort of works out just because I know a lot of people in LA from my time here, and sort of kept up with people out here.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. What? How many dates do they do a year? Do they just do kind of spot dates, or do they do a full kind of season?
I mean, they have a full season. It's their largest stuff. They probably do 1 week a month, 2 concerts, and then they also have a chamber series and they have an education series. And obviously, those things they don't necessarily need basses for them all the time, and they do have one bass, David Grossman, who's a bass player in the New York Philharmonic, and he flies out and does a lot of stuff. So he just wasn't able to make it this week. So
cool.
Yeah, and David and I go way back. We both studied with Orrin O'Brien, legendary bass player from the New York Philharmonic, first woman in the Philharmonic. And then I studied with David as well after I studied with her.
Oh, dope.
So yeah.
Now, the last time I studied classical was with you. And we were just talking about like 13 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
At a young age, what is it about classical music that grabs you?
Well, I didn't actually really listen to classical music when I was younger. I was a jazz major in my undergrad.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Your undergrad's in jazz.
And so I guess I went and saw the Philly Orchestra do The Rite of Spring.
Okay.
And after that, I was like, oh, wow.
You were hooked.
Yeah. Yeah. And they have a great string section. They're known for their string section. And, the basses just sounded awesome. And,
And that was enough to, like, send your whole career?
Well, actually
instead of just, like, shedding it on the side?
Well, my undergrad, I did an hour a week with jazz and an hour a week of classical. That was what the jazz major entailed.
Oh, okay.
And so then I took a year off after my undergrad and started studying with John Hood, who is a bass player in the Philly Orchestra. And then after that year, I went to Juilliard for my master's in classical performance. But in my head, I was like, this will just make my jazz album like that much better.
Sure.
Because I can do both.
Right.
But then sort of like, being immersed in that scene, and just sort of like getting on the audition track, and that sort of led to opportunities, which led to other opportunities, and it just sort of it just sort of like happened.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, my first year in New York, I was still doing like some gigs, like jazz gigs.
Yeah.
But that, what they paid for my level, someone just on the scene who's like probably nowhere, not serious at all in comparison to like serious, legit players. That I just thought it'd be worth more of my time to just like kind of really dive into the classical thing.
And just kind of pick a lane.
Yeah. Like just for the time being.
Yeah. At least to gain some traction in a career.
Yeah.
But now, as a teacher, do you teach jazz at all?
I teach jazz students,
Okay.
classical. I mean, we do have a jazz teacher where I teach at University of Northern Colorado, and we also have a bluegrass teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're like one of the, in Colorado, bluegrass it's like a real thing.
A bluegrass bass teacher?
Yes.
How is this longer than 3 lessons? Like, you have to hold the bass, you have to generate a sound, and then you have to play the fifth.
Well, I mean,
their feel is ridiculous. Like, I like bluegrass music.
yeah.
And that feel, like where they put it just on top and hold it there, it's amazing.
Yeah,
But I don't know what else, not to crap on anybody's thing, but I don't know what else there is to it.
It's hard for me to say. I've never, I know a little bit about jazz, but in comparison, I know very little of bluegrass.
Right.
But, it is so many bars, so many breweries, so many places like that have the bluegrass thing happening.
Okay.
So it's like, if you can say that a jazz performance degree is legitimate, then I guess you must have to. Although you can't actually major in it, you have to sort of like major in jazz, do an emphasis. I'm not exactly sure. It gets sort of blurry.
I mean, what would you do with the bluegrass degree? Besides
I don't know.
Teach at the school where you got it.
I know, right? But yeah.
So that's funny.
Yeah. I mean, I what I tell my students is just like, I mean, I try to show myself as an example, but, there's a lot of other bass players. I was just reading Derek Hodges' bio, who I actually knew growing up because we're both from New Jersey.
Sure.
And Adam Blackstone was all in that mix as well. But like Derek plays upright really well. Like in his bio, it says he's one of like the first people who at Temple University did both classical and jazz and stuff. But I think it's weird to, as a person without any gigs, which is sort of like your average music student or like someone who's learning at that young age, to say this is exactly what I want to do. And I know everyone does that, but I think that even in that case, the goal is, I think, to just please your teachers and to learn as much as you can, because like opportunities don't necessarily come in exactly how you want them.
Right.
Like I think probably everyone should learn electric. So if you have the opportunity to have some great electric gig, you should be able to take it. Like that's how my first like really serious teacher, Doug Mapp, kind of was. He was a jazz guy. He played in Delaware Symphony, played in all these sort of regional groups around the Northeast. But he also did jazz stuff, and he was just like,
just like available for anything at any point.
I pay my mortgage by playing bass,
right.
And he could do it all, and it was sort of a really cool learning experience to be in that. And so I've sort of kept that my whole life. And even though I do more or less one thing now, I don't know why students would potentially limit their access to gigs.
Sure. Sure. Do you think because of the nature of the internet and media that it's more difficult to just do the one thing? Like I think you have to be a little bit more. I mean, even including me, like we were just talking about with all this, like I have to learn all these other skills now. And this all is part of my music career, so to speak, but I have to learn video editing and this,
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess maybe it sounds like you're referring to the fact that with
I got
internet,
a little sidetracked.
Yeah, no, with the internet, the competition is so fierce.
Sure.
And everyone in every genre is playing, so well these days. So, yeah, that is definitely real. And if things start to work out with you and opportunity starts to open in like a certain track, I think you should go with it.
Sure.
And you certainly have to, that's not to say you try to do everything, but just like, and I think you can see it at the university level and at the sort of, music administration level. That idea that jazz majors take classical lessons is going away, I think, across the country. And, it's sort of an effort to make sure kids graduate within 4 years and the credits aren't overloading them, which is kind of true of all music majors, but so, I mean, yeah, it's definitely not easier today, for sure.
Right. Sorry about that. I got a little sidetracked. Yeah, what I was meaning was, as gig-wise, was having your palette diverse. Like, you still do jazz gigs? You do R&B gigs? You do top 40 gigs? Singer-songwriter gigs? Are you writing?
No. Well,
like what are you doing besides playing and teaching?
Well, I guess the most diverse thing I do is, when a jazz group will come and play with the symphony, a lot of times they won't bring a bass player, and they'll just hire me.
Okay.
And when I first got the gig, like I had to convince the management that I could do that.
Okay.
So like I played in Dina Menzel's band. I just played with kind of
really,
funny
I know
enough.
a backup singer in that band.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I just played with Kristen Chenoweth.
Okay.
Like Jersey Boys came to town. I played with them. You know, and it's all like with the orchestra. And a lot of bass players in other symphonies will do that. There's like one or two people, probably not more than two in any orchestra.
Right.
Some don't have any, but so that is nice. So I will get to play jazz. I will get to play electric.
You're like the bass player, and then
Yes.
not a section guy.
Not in the section.
okay.
Yeah.
Is that nice? Is it nice for you to like go back and do that thing and just kind of be the bass player in the band?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I have to, if I want to move the orchestra when I'm playing in the section, I have to convince the section to like move it with me.
Right.
But when I'm playing with my amp,
Sure.
I'm just like, this is
we're
exactly
going.
where
Yeah,
it
we're
is,
going.
And that's always nice to do that.
Yeah.
To have that feeling again.
So what like I know what it's like to direct a band from being that guy, just being the only bass player. What's it like directing a band as a section leader?
Well, I mean, the thing is you have to have a section that works really well together.
Uh-huh.
And in Colorado, in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of really nice hires.
Okay.
New bass players coming to the section. And so we're just kind of see things the same way and feel the beat the same way.
Is it a discussion that happens about what you want to do? Are you strictly leading by example while playing at rehearsals?
Yeah, I mean, normally that's the case. And if we are ever sort of not in sync, I'll definitely say something, to the fellow section mates, like let's not push, or we're dragging, or don't compress the rhythm, or I know the orchestra's rushing. We're not going to rush. Make it sound bad.
Right.
Make it hurt.
Yeah. So that they know.
They know.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. That's cool.
Which is still sometimes less passive. Sometimes that passive aggressiveness works in a musical setting rather than actually saying, "Hey, you're rushing."
Yeah. Depends on how much of a dick you want to be.
And
to what degree? Like, you want to be a passive.
It depends what the relationship is, and sometimes,
Agreed.
obviously, if this bass section's working really hard and doing what they should be doing, the orchestra should just listen. But that's that's in the best circumstances. That's not always the case.
And then, how personally do you deal with that? Were you were initially comfortable with that kind of leadership qualities with establishing direction, or did this take you some time to grow into and kind of get comfortable in your own skin with the music and being a leader?
Yeah, well, when I first got the job in the symphony, I actually thought it was like my absolute right to just do that all the time,
Really?
And so, you have like a 2-year probation period, before you get tenure in an orchestra, and I had to I was told I needed to be a better colleague.
Okay.
Before they were going to give me tenure.
Right.
So I wasn't like a raging ass.
Yeah.
And so it has been good, and it has been a growing experience, going through that, even though at the time that was really hard to hear as someone who was
Was it just zeal?
I just thought I was the shit, and it's not really. And when you're in school, and then I was in New World Symphony for 2 years, when you're in those situations, you're playing with people your age.
Right.
And everyone wants to do better
Sure.
and get a big job and have a career. And then when you get a job, those people are I need to cut my lawn. I need to get my roof redone. My car got backed into. I need to they just have real life things. And not having any life and barely knowing anyone, moving from Miami to Denver, that just still wasn't a thing to me.
Right, the really just day-to-day.
Yeah, what life is actually about, getting beyond the music. So it took me a while to sort of understand that. And you have to. Yeah, so it took me a while, but.
So it's made you more empathetic now that you've been up there. How long have you been in Colorado?
This is maybe my 11th season.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so now that you're plugged in and you have a life there and you got your routines, you're clearly more empathetic.
Yes.
To the struggle.
Yes.
And the all right, this is the gig, that's life.
Yeah, and also I always sort of admired this in people, and I feel like I'm finally actually maybe getting a little smidgen better at it. Like, there's just a way to talk to people in a respectful manner.
Sure.
Even if you want to say something that's, could be negative in a different context,
Yeah.
And like learning how to do that is like learning how to be a professional.
Right.
And, it's taken me a long time, but yeah, so absolutely, having more empathy and just like having that professionalism that has like left the discourse of so many areas of our society.
Yeah. Being that it's a kind of poor section, you get chummy with people. It's like dudes I gig with a long time. I don't speak to them the same way because like we're homies on a certain level.
Yeah.
How do you maintain your professionalism when there's like a personal, maybe off the gig bond that has happened?
Yeah, I mean, well,
is it just an understanding that like, all right, we're at work, and so you just put on your at work hat?
Yeah, well, I think, I'm trying to think of like my friends in the orchestra or whatever, or I mean, I think for the most part, those people, one of the reasons we get along is they also feel the same, and they're trying to always bring their A game.
Okay, mutual
and be
respect.
Prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So, yeah, I don't know if I've ever been in a situation where it's been like one of my close friends totally underprepared, or if they are, it's because of something serious happened or some very real reason, and then they might even just straight up say, because we're, bros, like, look, for whatever reason,
it didn't happen.
Like I didn't prepare at all. I'm going to be bullshitting this rehearsal or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's better than.
It might be better.
Yeah, I think it's better. At least there's like a warning shot fired.
Yeah,
like everybody knows.
Like, hey, don't look too closely over here.
Yeah, don't expect too much on this one.
I'll get it before the concert.
Yeah. The world, I almost feel like I'm talking to you as if I'm not a musician because that world to me is so foreign. Yeah. Like I'm sure that it's kind of all the same on some level. It's just musicians going to work.
Yes.
But it's like I don't know anything about it. I've never been involved with it. I don't.
Yeah, I mean the tenure track, performing musician it's like a real interesting thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, what can you say about sort of these? I mean, they're institutions, like an art museum in a way. And yeah, there are really weird changes that take place,
administratively.
I mean, like there's I mean, when you have a huge administration, when you have like, when you have like half the budget is fundraising or more or whatever. I mean, that the whole everything changes, and I mean, it's interesting, and I think, looking at it at the absolute sort of best way, it's the way these pieces really come to life. Like there's a difference if you look and see a print of, one of Van Gogh's paintings, or you see a poster of Van Gogh's paintings, or you see it online or whatever, and then you go and see it. Like, it's better. Like, there's obviously no question about that. And I mean, I'm biased. I'm coming from this perspective because I am a performer, and so I'm certainly, if you could talk to someone who's in the fine or decorative arts, they might have totally different things to say, and I'm sure that's valid as well. But I see it from this angle.
Of course.
But when you listen to a Beethoven symphony or any sort of masterpiece of the classical repertoire, that really comes to life in a live performance. Like, yeah, you can listen to it on CD, and I do, and I enjoy it. But there is sort of no recreating the sound of, 80 to 100 people making music on stage in a powerful, completely acoustic environment.
Right.
As soon as you bring in, like, sound reproduction, in a way, it lessens it.
Yeah, I agree.
There's some sort of manipulation. There's some sort of coloring, even the best of circumstances. Which then also, like, leads me to say it's like why, the concert hall is I believe the concert hall is like the final and the ultimate live performing experience.
Okay.
And when I hear, and I think jazz kind of sits weirdly in the middle, but when I think of like rock and pop, the pinnacle of that art form is the album.
Yes.
Like I mean, I've seen a lot of rock bands, and I'm sure people will disagree, but, you know, when you see a live rock band, it doesn't really sound better than the recorded album that they have.
No, because there's a show.
It's a
because
show.
You're going, now there's a visual component.
There's a visual and there's an energy component, you know. And obviously that's changing with backing tracks. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Which, you know, I could talk at length about as well. But, you know, just like once you get an amplifier involved, once you get a speaker involved, once you have a sound man involved, it changes that. And so I think that, you know, the orchestra is sort of, you know, what I consider sort of the pinnacle of live performance. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say I don't like everything else. Like, if I had to sort of tell you the amount of percentage. Of course, I'm going to ask, like, who are your rock bands?
Yeah, like, I now want to know who your rock bands are.
Yeah.
I do want to come back to this concert hall thing. I got some questions about that. But as a quick tangent, like, who are your rock guys?
Well, you know, I got to pull out my iPhone because I'm sort of all over the place these days.
There's a good chance I don't know of them. Like,
you know, I've been listening to Vampire Weekend. They're like double disc album they released a couple months ago.
I've heard of the group.
It's been really great. I mean, this summer I've really been listening to City Pop. Benny Sings. That's Benny Sings is the name of the album, I guess. Oh, I'm sorry, the name of the group. And then, also, I guess my favorite thing this summer has been Fruit Bats, Gold Past Life, the album. It's just great. It's
Are these like on the indie tip?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's kind of where I gravitated towards my whole life. I love Sufjan Stevens.
Man.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Like I've been in like a Motown cave lately because of this transcription thing.
Okay.
But and like I know I've talked about it on here before. I get overwhelmed with how to find new music.
Yeah.
Like it's so, or like even movies sometimes. Like I'll turn on Netflix or Hulu. Like there's so much.
Yeah.
And then I get burnt out from searching.
Yeah.
It's like screw it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do something else.
I'm fortunate. I have people that I used to play in like sort of rock and indie bands growing up. I still keep in touch with them, and so we just have like a big thread, and people are always constantly throwing up albums, and that has helped. Like I think everything I named has probably comes
from that thread.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because like I ask get people on here regularly because like I don't know. Like all right, like now I'll go check it out.
Yeah.
But it's
I
would have never probably stumbled across that.
Yeah.
You know.
I like Apple Music because I had a big CD collection that I burned in, painstakingly ripped into my computer like 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
And that's what started. So now I just do Apple.
Sure.
I finally, for years I was against the streaming thing completely and just buying albums. And I've sort of just given up.
I've caved.
Even though I was a huge opponent of it for so long. But I know a lot of people say they like Spotify for that. Because you put in what you listen to, and it has great suggestions.
Okay.
Whereas, like, Apple, they say, is not very good at that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I heard that there's a transition happening with Apple that I'm not sure really what's going on with there, and iTunes is doing a whole thing. I don't know if it's going to just streaming now.
I've heard that as
Is
well.
that what's happening with it?
Which got me scared, and that's what kind of got me into the just buying it.
Yeah,
just
I
paying
did
for
too.
it monthly.
Right.
But, as an artist, I was always like, if I like it, I'll buy the album.
Yeah.
And I was doing that for so long, and then I was just like, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
It's
almost like you're going against the current at a certain point because everything is this wave of streaming, and you're trying to swim through it. It's screw it, I'm just going to ride the wave. Like, it is what it is. Like I did the best I could. I have good intentions
for the time
about
being,
about artists getting whatever money. I still believe in that, but
if I had to do it all over again, and I used to shit on records so much, but I would just like get a turntable, and I would do vinyl.
Yeah.
Like I'm like too late. It's too late for me. I'm too old, and that would cost me so much money
to go out and buy an actual record player.
And just like I want this on an album, like it would.
Yeah. To go back and like duplicate my collection on vinyl.
Yeah.
If I could even find some of them.
Or even like a quarter of it.
Yeah.
Probably would be ridiculous.
Yeah. If some of them are even in print, or if there's a vinyl pressing of it at all.
Yeah, totally. So.
Yeah. I don't know. That's just what it is. Yeah. So back to the concert hall experience. that idea, not an idea, it's a reality of 80 people playing this music and it's breathing life into these classic works, that has to be insanely powerful. Does having to deal with the administration aspect of it kind of take a shit on that a little bit? Like, does it become lessened? Does it become more of a job? I mean, because I do think, and no, for me, whatever thing I wanted to do in life and then did, there's always an aspect of like, oh, it's just this. And not that I don't appreciate it, but it's been realized, so it's been debunked a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think, if you're lucky enough to like, what you're talking about, I think is like if you're lucky enough to like make your passion into a career.
It never really sucks at the end of the day.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think the other side of the coin is that like, if it's a job and someone's paying you for it, like chances are, there's some magic lost.
Right.
I think, Colorado right now, we're really lucky. We really have a great management, and we like our management.
Okay.
And that was not the case my first couple of years. We sort of have a totally different management now, and mostly new board, new CEO, new board chair, whatever. Wow. But
is that pretty recent?
No, I mean it's been a while.
Okay.
At least like 9 to 8 years. But so yeah, I mean when you're dealing with a bad management, like a lot of orchestras are, like that is the most stressful thing because one of the things is you play in an orchestra. If that gig dries up, it's like, okay, L.A., New York, I don't know, maybe a few other places, but doubtful. Probably just L.A. or New York. You might be able to like piece together enough stuff,
right?
To like make it work and like get your mortgage paid.
Sure.
But like
if you can get a mortgage
Denver,
in New York or L.A.,
right.
You may be a rent.
If you're or whatever, but if it dries up in like Indianapolis or Baltimore or Cleveland or whatever, that it's hard. It's not like it's not like 100 people can just start going and like playing classical gigs every weekend. Like that's just not the thing.
Not there.
Okay, obviously there are freelancers in all of those cities doing it, but it's not like they would just have room to like accommodate 100 more people.
Right.
Right. So it's risky in that regard. And so when things are going bad, it's like nerve-wracking. Because when I was a freelancer, it's like you're like, all right, well, if this goes to hell, like it's fine. Like I'll just sort of my priorities will switch. So there is safety in that in a sort of weird way. But yeah, I mean, dealing with the management, like again, I think it's just like learning how to be a professional and how to deal with, people who know about marketing, people who know about fundraising, and so that's just, I think, again, good orchestras know how to deal with that. Good orchestral musicians. And
do you play in an opera also?
No, the Colorado Symphony used to do the opera, but I think they realized that they could make more money just doing concerts themselves.
Okay.
Opera Colorado is like a pretty small thing, and so they could kind of not really afford to pay us.
Yeah.
What we could make on our own.
Sure.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the opera itself uses freelancers, or
uses freelancers, yeah.
Okay.
And like here LA Opera is like a pretty big gig, and in Utah the symphony does the opera. San Diego the symphony does the opera.
Okay.
So yeah, we used to do it, but not anymore. Yeah. But that is a very common thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now is that completely different? I mean, I know. What's the question I want to ask? If I ever went out for a classical job, and this is something that I would want to do at some point in my career, I would want to play in an opera. Because it doesn't seem as demanding.
Well, I mean, it's a totally different set of excerpts.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, obviously the material's different.
Right.
No doubt. They're operas.
But. So, it's like the thing is what happens is people, these players will be working on Beethoven 5 for 10 years.
Yeah.
And, and Einheldenleben, rehearsal 9 and things like this. But then an opera audition comes up and everybody's like played the excerpt for 3 months, or something. So it's kind of really funny.
Okay.
I do know bass players that have worked on opera rep because they liked it so much and they were like, I'm going to take this seriously. So it's very hard, you know. I started doing good in auditions when I had already played every excerpt in an audition at some point.
Okay.
So then I would see a list. I'd be like, well, I've prepared all those multiple times. I've played those in an audition multiple times. And so like the pressure just goes down. Sure. And your comfort level and experience is just so up, you know, so high. But you know, I took the Met audition a couple years ago, and it's like there was one excerpt I had worked on. So So I'm walking in there. I've never played it, you know, and like learning how something goes under stress.
How far in advance did you see the list?
9 weeks.
Oh wow.
You know, maybe.
Okay.
So it's like, you know, it's like so highly specialized, the audition taking process. Like you might have a fingering that works. You go take an audition. Oh, you crash and burn with that fingering, so you switch it. And so you learn like what sort of really holds up under fire.
Okay.
Whereas I think jazz musicians can do that any gig. Well, like I've been working all this like super fast thumb position solos, and then you go and you try it, and you're like, oh, that sounded like shit. I'm not going to do it again. Right. So you learn right away, like because you have, I think, potentially more performance opportunities.
Yeah.
And as far as auditions, you know, with a bass, that's expensive. So, you know.
So when getting these together, did you get those excerpts together over time by just like these were things you had to prepare for different auditions, or did you somehow get your hands on, you know, did Oren or somebody tell you like you need to get these ones together?
Yeah.
And there's like standardized.
Yes, I mean Oren O'Brien in her bass notebook, which is also published by Carl Fisher. She has a list of like the top excerpts, like ranked in order of how often they get asked.
Oh wow!
And you know, we worked on those. Like most serious bass students are working on excerpts from when they're an undergrad.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Okay.
You've gone over
that's
everything.
Stuff I don't know about. Like
You've gone over everything with your teacher.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you just polish it as you get older with your maturity?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's fascinating. I liked jazz before I could even understand it. And as I've gotten older, I realized that there's a lot of similarities to how I think and create process and freedom and all those things. Have you learned that about yourself, that the deeper you get into this and the older you get, the more self-awareness you have about yourself, how there's parallels of your personality that really responded to classical music? And it was less about just what would happen professionally, but it was really like the music called you personally. Have you found a connection like that?
Well, I think I maybe was always slightly better at practicing classical music.
Okay.
You know,
there's an innate interest in it to
sure.
choose it.
Yeah, I mean, I I really like jazz, and I've been like loving Christian Scott lately.
Okay, yeah.
Like I can't get enough of it. But I think probably I was always slightly better at just working on stuff with the bow, like things that potentially had a little bit less creativeness, I guess, or
because I think that's
whatever,
where guys on my side of the fence, that's the disconnect of like, I love getting dropped a lead sheet and having to now put it all together in real time. Like I love that. And so like being presented with this piece of music that is, so much of it is dictated for me. I don't know how to connect with that as well.
Yeah.
Because I love the creative process of putting this together in real time.
Yeah, I mean, well, that is the hard bit. I mean, there's a lot of people that, a lot of students, and I've certainly been guilty of this at times, and I probably will be guilty of it again. It's like, you can get the music you need to audition with or perform with to like 80%, like pretty reasonably. A lot of people can do that.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, fewer can get it to 90, but getting it all the way to like almost 100, like thing is just so polished, like that takes, it's sort of like a logarithmic scale. It's like exponentially more difficult.
Sure.
But you know, the really best people are doing that and are able to do that. And so I think it's just.
Is that kind of the carrot that keeps the classical player?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, it might not be the carrot, but it's something that you just have to do.
Okay.
Like it never, when I don't know. I mean, I don't really practice jazz anymore. I certainly, if I have something coming up, I will definitely
check it out.
I will get some lead sheets out, and I'll just start walking and make sure my bass lines make sense.
Yeah.
But when I get done that's kind of fun. I do enjoy that. I'm like, oh, this is nice. And I might read some transcriptions and be like, oh, this is I'll read some solos just to kind of get the whole,
dust it off.
So I'm not a total faker. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's anyway. But with, and that's fun. When I work on this classical stuff to really try to get it all the way to that end, like I was just mentioning, when I get done I'm not like, yeah, that was awesome. I just go I put in a good day's of work.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm just that was a job well done.
Okay.
So it's do I like practicing? I mean, definitely sometimes, but it's
right.
there's so much more. I've found what really works for me for classical is that being able to just try to put in that sort of the rote repetition of getting things so polished.
Yeah.
At the end is what's really, really important, and that's the hardest. It's the most boring.
Is the details
at the end to just continue just keep it at such a high level.
Sure.
As your tempo increases,
So let's take whatever piece of music. It's kind of doesn't matter. So you have this piece of music that you're learning or revisiting. How do you block off your practice time? You read it all the way through rubato just to understand it. What's kind of your process about how this snowballs until you get from first time on the music stand till one of those good day work. Okay. I'm at 90% working on 100.
Well, I think if you can avoid making mistakes while playing in a tempo.
Sure.
So if you find the tempo that you can play that thing perfectly at.
Right before the wheels come off. They start shaking a little bit.
Well, no, I mean
tempos.
What tempo does it feel like you're driving in the nicest car ever? So for a student working on it for the first time, that might be impossible. But let's say you already sort of know, you got your fingerings, you've sort of played it out of tempo yesterday.
You're comfortable with where things are going in the
so you
piece.
know, okay, teacher gave you your fingerings or whatever. I think then the process in the most perfect of scenarios, and there are some exceptions to this with super fast strokey things, Mozart 35 fourth movement, Bartered Bride, right at the end, it changes so much at the actual performance tempo that you need to also work and backwards from to work on the stroke. But if we're not talking about that, you just want to find that tempo, even if it's a quarter.
Right.
Let's say the tempo is 100. Maybe you need to start at 20.
Yeah.
And obviously you need to know how to use the metronome to make that work, because you're not going to put the metronome on 20.
You can't get it down that slow, right?
Or whatever. It will be totally nonsense. But so if you find this place where you can play it, and you slowly work up from that.
Okay.
Always keeping a good tone, good intonation, and keeping it where you aren't
mastered.
making. Yes.
Yeah.
And then when you hit a problem, you essentially stop, and then you come back and you do another session, and you just keep doing this.
Yeah.
And maybe for the first week, you're working on.
And now, is your process to focus on? Let's say there's 8 bars. You focus on these 8 bars until you can move on, or do you keep playing it slow until those are seamless?
Yeah.
Within the entirety of the piece.
Well, it just depends if the excerpt is generally similar. You know what I mean? If all of a sudden it doesn't change from a legato passage to a totally off the string spiccato bouncy jumping around passage like that, maybe I would work on those in 2 separate things. But provided that's not the case, I try to tell my students, most people practice, they make some mistakes and they slowly speed it up, and they make some mistakes and they look at those mistakes and then they'll go back and forth. So they're not actually just playing it through.
Sure.
And I think our brains learn in a way where you're just putting on wallpaper, every day, and then every day it sort of starts to fall off, and then you just put it back on.
Yeah.
You would never put on wallpaper by cutting out interesting sections and then just sort of trying to eventually paste them together. But you think of the way, exactly. If you think of the way of people practice, it's actually not that. So if you can truly never make a mistake, even if you're practicing so incredibly slow.
Sure.
Now, who has the patience that you're doing that when you're 15
sure.
or 18 or whatever?
And actually practicing that slow is even harder.
It is.
Like if you practice something closer to the natural heart rate, which is like what, 98 or something, I think that's always a good starting place, because that's where things feel natural because of your heart rate. Then go up and then go down.
Right.
Because just playing slow is harder.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, absolutely. So that's what I recommend to my students. Obviously, that's in a perfect world. That also probably means that they kind of know it. They already know it. And so for me, when I'm working on these things, at this point, I kind of, for a lot of the standard repertoire and excerpts, I go this is how I work on Beethoven 5. This is how I work on Mozart 40. These things are always hard to me, and I need to practice them in a certain way, and I know what is the least time consuming, right? Getting good at practice is just getting better at time management and knowing what works. Right. And when you're young, you have to experiment. But then once you already know it, that polished step of never making a mistake, going from a tempo you really can play it at,
right,
and just increasing it very slowly.
Sure. So, and I'm kind of asking all these questions about practice because it is such a controlled environment of what you have to practice. It's much different than just me sitting down in front of changes, and then trying different things over the changes to see what I like,
right,
or what'll connect to something else. So hearing you talk about practice, I think is really cool because it's a very technical. It's technique in its highest order, kind of at all times. There's not a lot of creativity or concepts that you practice, I would assume. Whereas me, if I sit down, I'll have a concept, and I'll practice a concept, and that's
right.
That's different, and I don't, So hearing you talk about the things that relate to the bass and specifically preparing a piece of music, is obviously universal in just practice schedule and time manage that. So how do you break up your practice regimen or tell students to segment theirs to kind of cover all the bases? And I know Oren's book talks about that.
Yeah.
And actually 2 sessions a day, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, if you're a student, I think what she has written is absolutely great. And that's what I do. I mean, I'll do 3 to 5 minutes of open strings, and then I'll do 20 to 30 minutes of scales every day.
Just warm up.
Yeah, for sure.
Always picking new scales.
I mean, I'll do half the circle of fifths in some manner or the other, going up, going down, going up by a step.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Just trying all different things. So a few years ago, I published these transcriptions of Telemann unaccompanied suites. He calls them fantasies. But he wrote one in each key for violin, and I heard this amazing recording of a violist doing it, and I was like, wow, this almost sounds like, Telemann is sort of considered a little lesser. Oh.
No, you're still good.
Telemann is considered a little lesser, I think, and but hearing this amazing violist, Nobuko Imai, play them, and it's this great album. Yeah, everyone should get it. And she's such a great violist. I was sort of inspired, so I spent a long time sort of checking out all these different suites and different keys, and my hopes was rather than in what we were talking about, never making a mistake, some things are just so hard that's not necessarily possible. So I thought, well, let's let, for bass, audition pieces generally are, whatever you're going to be doing, so the excerpts, and then a solo and a solo movement of Bach. So a concerto and then a solo Bach cello suite. Okay. And I thought, well, the problem is, and for me this was totally true, I started learning Bach's cello suites when I was so bad, there are still some movements that I just play, all of a sudden it just sounds like I'm 10 again. Not 10.
Muscle memory goes back to the formative years. That's hilarious.
Totally. So I thought, well, I'll make these suites for these Telemann suites. They're still really nice. They're beautiful. Some are easier than Bach. Some are harder than Bach.
Okay.
That being said, anyway, so some are easier, some are harder. And you can edit that little shit. And my thought was that my students could just play this poorly, slowly work it up, gain all these new techniques.
So you don't sabotage the
exactly.
Bach.
And then when they're good, when they kind of deal with all and struggle with the Telmann, then they can go to Bach and just be like, oh, now I know how to play this. So that was the goal. And
have you used students as guinea pigs for this idea?
I have, and I found that they're potentially harder than I thought.
Okay.
Like, there's sort of no medium movement. There's really difficult and really easy in these suites. And that's just how it worked out. There is like another movement, another key I want to potentially do, and maybe if I ever reissue it, it's actually published on Carl Fisher. And that video that I sent you is me doing a sort of recording of one of the movements of that. But yeah, that was to sort of like hopefully kind of further that sort of idea.
Besides that record with the violist, what's a reference record for the bass students to check out?
I mean,
would that be something you would look into doing so that they can audibly hear it?
I did actually record all of them.
Okay.
And my thought, it's published with Carl Fisher, and my original, when I approached them, I said, I mean, this is years ago.
Yeah.
I was like, it should come with some download code that if you buy it, you enter this thing, and then you get the album.
Yeah, that'd be great.
These days it would be like, why don't you just put it up on self-publish on iTunes or whatever.
But are you dealing with copyrights with material?
No, because that's over
100 years or whatever.
Yeah. I think it depends on the medium, but that's definitely
sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would love to do the recording I have is obviously sort of synced. I would love to do a live recording of that. Maybe at the ISB convention.
Okay. Like a concert recording or just an audio recording?
A concert recording.
Okay.
Like actually show people how it could be like done like live.
Right.
Rather than like a studio thing in like a perfect environment where I could do it 50 times until I'm like, that was great, which is what I have on YouTube now.
Okay.
And that was sort of like a limit of time because, and budget.
Right. So now, did you put the book together and then approach the publisher, or did you kind of like write? So I have approached a publisher about a book before, and they were not interested.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't partnered with anybody or anybody to grandfather me in either. But they weren't interested in just like someone walking up with an idea, and I could show them excerpts of the book.
Yeah. I did it for myself, and then once I started to like get close to the end, Oren knew some people who knew people, and I was able to. I don't know if it helped that I teach at a university. I have no idea. I have no idea if they were just like, we need more bass.
Yeah.
I don't know what they consider.
I mean, it's clearly a fresh book. There's no other book out there like it. So they're nailing the market on it, although it's a niche market.
It is. I mean, the first year it sold something like 350 copies, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
I'm just about to get the second year's sales report, so I'm not sure about that. But I mean, this is feasibly something that they could sell for the next 100 years. Like that will always sort of exist. Like what is sort of difficult, but not solo Bach, but before that. That was the goal, and I think to a certain degree that kind of works.
Mission accomplished?
Yeah. I mean, you have to learn a lot of tenor clef.
Okay.
You will get good at tenor cef.
Sure.
I did.
Is that, well, you mean you already had that going in?
Yeah, I mean, but now I'm...
I never really, it never landed with me. But that's my thing, though. But like in classical, like it's definitely...
Well, sometimes people just get so used to like, they want to play the notes sounding right.
Sure.
So if you're reading something 8VA, you're essentially doing a transposition, even an octave transposition.
Sure.
But you're taking some sort of brain energy away from tone production.
Oh, really? I want to explain that more. So if I'm looking at a G on treble clef versus a G in tenor clef versus the same pitch in bass clef, and I'm talking about like the harmonic and thumb position G.
Yeah.
If I'm talking about that pitch written in those three clefs, what is taken away by reading that up like 8VA versus
the easiest way to read music is to have no ledger lines and have it sit in the staff.
Sure.
Like well within the staff. And so tenor clef solves an issue of
that gap.
I mean, when you anything between like a C, you think basically like the majority of your G string
sure
is going to sit at the top of the bass clef where you're going to have to start using ledger lines, and then lower than treble.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still right in there, but if it's the passage work is all in there with double stops and shit, you're going to have double stops over too many ledger lines, and when that changes, and I mean, so if you get this, my edition, you'll see that that's like why I used it. Okay. And I wrote, after a while I had rules for myself, like I'm only going to use tenor clef if it fits this criteria, and if it's this many notes that I would, and this many ledger lines in a row, and that's what I'll do. So, I mean, I tried to make it as user-friendly as possible because I certainly would rather read bass clef.
Sure.
You know, like every bass player would.
Right.
So that was kind of the goal, and, you know.
But you're exposed, you're exposed to tenor clef. Like, I haven't seen tenor clef in like 5 years. Like, it doesn't, it's not part of my thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that was sort of like an ancillary hope for this. It was like more out of necessity, because it was just like, well,
you can't really get around that issue.
That. Yeah. And like where it sits, you know, and like that also is like a product of like what key I put it in and how I wanted to make it high, but not too high, to just be below your average first box suite at pitch, reading it with the cello part, where that sits on the bass. I wanted it to be slightly lower than that. Okay. And that is tenor clef range.
Okay.
So that's just...
And then how many, what was the process like, I guess, to take a thing and move key but not lose the integrity of the emotional content of it? Because every key is going to give it a color.
Well, I mean, sure, you know... I didn't even get that far. It was like, what key can it physically be played in?
Okay.
And then, you know, I don't know...
Just because of how the keys lay on the bass.
How it lays, how difficult he wrote it. And, you know, for violin, all these things are really simple. So many of the difficult things are simple for a violinist. So I was just like, you know, there was maybe one question of this key or that key. But for the most part, it was like, this is really by far the easiest, using the open strings harmonics and how that works. So this is what it has to be.
Sure.
And so, you know, like it...
The music really dictated it.
Yeah. The difficulty of the music and how he wrote it sort of dictated a lot of those things.
Okay.
I mean, I had to still discover them.
Yeah.
But I didn't definitely decide them.
Right.
It was out of the sheer necessity.
How long did that whole process take? Like going through them and really getting inside of them and seeing where they...
I mean, I probably learned... originally, I thought I would do 4 suites, and in the actual publication, there are 2 suites.
Okay.
It's like 7 movements total. 1 movement has 3, 1 movement has 4. So, 1 suite has 4, 1 suite has 3. And I probably played 3 or 4 suites in about 6 keys each.
Okay.
For probably 3 years before I went like, all right, maybe 2 years before I went, all right. Yeah. Now I'm narrowing it down to like just these 2 keys.
Okay.
And like that suite doesn't work in any key that I can find.
Yeah.
You know, and also you want it to be playable. It's like you could certainly read it like really low, but like all this fast passage work like really low on the bass, like that's like that's also like you want to be able to play it for people and they go, oh, that's kind of nice.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I mean that's obviously the goal.
Yeah.
Is that still something you're working towards? Is getting a recording done? Is that in the works, or is it just kind of in the back burner of your mind?
You know, actually, the next thing I would really like to do a sort of collection of like modern pieces, sort of like living composers.
Okay. For solo bass, or for like a duet?
For like solo bass.
Okay.
Pieces that people have already published that I kind of really like, and you know, I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in composition these days. You know, modern new music, and as opposed to like say what went on in like the 70s, 80s, 90s even.
Yeah.
Like I think now people are approaching tonality and rhythms and just all this really cool stuff. So I would just like to, you know, just put a fresh edition. I mean, when was the last collection of like modern living composers for bass? I don't know, but
I don't know.
It's probably not. Not recently.
If you don't know, I definitely don't know. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
So, Yeah.
So you're doing that, and then we were talking just a second ago about the concerts that you do with the symphony at the Red Rocks.
Yeah, I guess the last thing, because we were talking about getting back to that concert hall idea, and I don't want to sound like so elitist or something. I mean, I wanted to just definitely, while we're on this podcast, to just say that these concerts that the symphony does at Red Rocks is like, I think like a real pinnacle of sort of modern live rock music. I mean, the setting itself is like just absolutely
I mean, I've
amazing.
never been there, but like I flat out asked you while we were on the little break there trying to charge this, like, dude, did you play with Amos Lee? And you're like, yeah. I'm like, damn it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like,
really great.
That's amazing.
Yeah, earlier this year we played with Bella Fleck, with Victor Wooten. So, like, I was like a little starstruck, but man, I just never want to be that guy who goes up.
I would have been more because of Bela.
Yeah.
Like, I got a bunch of bluegrass records
with
him
a couple times, and I mean, he's just the most down-to-earth dude.
He seems like it.
I mean, they all are. But we'll get emails from the management saying, just be careful, like, don't go up to just be cool.
Yeah.
And I just never wanted to say, listen, like, you're, like, one of my first concerts at the Symphony was with Ben Folds, and, I grew up listening to that, and I just never wanted to be like, oh, your music, there's sort of no way to come off not strange, and that's just a personal thing, but yeah, I mean, the productions and the sort of the atmosphere that Red Rocks has is just really ridiculous. So I would really love to sort of just get the word out more. It's just like that should be the stage unto which live rock music is really judged, like in that setting.
Okay.
Like it's only 10,000 people.
Oh, right, in that size of in that amphitheater vibe? Okay.
Yeah. Like this amazing natural amphitheater with the symphony, so every instrument you could possibly imagine,
it's there.
Yeah, it's like what can you do? And like the symphonies, we work hard. Like we made a show with Tenacious D. We did that this summer. I mean we've done a lot. We played with Flaming Lips there.
Okay. Has that place always been like I've heard about it a lot? I guess what's the history is the question. What's the history of people,
it was actually
the pop rock acts coming to do concerts there, not only just as concerts, but like DVD, video footage.
Yeah.
Kind of to capture the visual of the amphitheater as well.
I mean, it's definitely gotten more because our management has been very accommodating.
Okay.
There are a lot of rules and a lot of regulations that if the management doesn't want to work with you, like you're not going to get it done.
Right.
Just to work with the AFM and work with the local union. So it's been more recent. The market has kind of dropped off.
Now it's just put it on YouTube for
and we actually just did
ads.
something where we were on we just did these 2 nights with One Republic.
Oh, cool.
Colorado band. But that was a crazy production. But one of the songs was recorded and played on that show that this guy's on, about singer-songwriters.
Okay. I don't know it, but I know that it exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
So that was, that's cool, and potentially that will be released on Netflix, like the whole concert.
That's cool.
But
and those seems like really just a fun process to be a part of, and
and it's, just the vibe of that place is sort of always special when you're up there.
Yeah.
And so, the Beatles played there. You know what I mean?
See, the closest thing I have to that, playing one of those stages, was the Beacon in New York. Like, and then I'm backstage, like, looking at in the green room with, like, pictures of the Stones in the green room.
Yeah.
It's really surreal. And it's fun to, like, just get to those places and just kind of absorb that for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that when I was at Juilliard, too, I would always be, like, in the bathroom, like, Yo-Yo Ma shit here.
Yeah.
And I think about that when I'm at Red Rocks. I'm like, I wonder.
Right. Who took a dump?
Yeah.
Cool, man. Where can students find the book? Where can bass players find the book?
Anywhere. They can just search my name and Telmon, or go to Carl Fisher's website.
Okay.
And they can buy it right from there.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well,
it was great chatting with you, Ryan.
Likewise,
it was a lot of fun, man.
Thank you. All right.
If you have enjoyed this episode and would like to know more about upcoming guests, and other bass shed happenings, you can text the word SHED, SHED, to 66866. I try to make it easy. I try to make it easy as possible to stay connected. And let's be honest, we're all sending texts throughout the day, so just shoot me one. Shoot me one that says SHED, SHED, to 66866, and we'll get you plugged into the newsletter. You can also hear previous versions of the podcast at Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. Please take a second to rate the show. And if you'd like, you can donate to keep this thing happening. There is a link for that at thebassshed.com/podcast. All right, that was my talk with Nick Recuber. I like what he said in passing about muscle memory and how when you play something at a formative or younger time, in your musicianship, your hands just automatically go back to executing it that way, and muscle memory working against you. I remember when we talked about that stuck out to me, and I'm glad that I wasn't the only one, and maybe that's the point of this whole podcast, is just so I don't feel like the only one. Or maybe I should do a podcast from a therapy session. That's Nick's story. My name's Ryan. I'm sticking to it, and I'll catch you on the next one.